"You're fired." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared across the gleaming mahogany desk at Meredith Blackwood, who'd been appointed CEO precisely 8 hours ago. "I'm sorry?" My voice came out small, despite my 15 years at Blackwood Financial Partners. "Your performance metrics aren't where they need to be, Emma." Meredith didn't look up from my personnel file, her manicured finger tracing down columns of data I knew by heart. "We're streamlining operations, and underperformers must go." The irony burned in my chest. I'd spent the last decade quietly generating some of our highest value investment strategies, while her mother, Victoria Blackwood, protected my privacy and unique working arrangement. The arrangement that kept me behind the scenes, analyzing market patterns while others presented my findings. "Did you discuss this with Victoria?" I asked, my hands trembling slightly as I gripped the armrests. Meredith's eyes flashed with annoyance. "My mother handed over control yesterday. I don't need her permission to make personnel decisions." She closed my file with a snap. "You have until the end of the day to clear out your things." The office suddenly felt airless. 15 years of my life, dismissed in under 5 minutes by someone who'd been handed her position through nepotism, someone who clearly hadn't bothered to read my actual contract. "I understand," I said quietly, rising from my chair. My knees felt weak, but I forced myself to stand tall. "I'll be out by 5. As I turned to leave, my eyes caught the vintage Montblanc fountain pen displayed in its glass case on the credenza behind her. The pen Victoria had used to sign my special agreement 5 years ago, when everything had changed. Meredith had no idea what that pen, or my contract, actually meant. I walked out without another word, passing Meredith's new executive assistant who averted her eyes. By noon, whispers had spread throughout the office. People I'd worked alongside for years suddenly found reasons to avoid the break room when I entered. Only Drew Bennett, our chief legal counsel and my closest ally at the firm, dared to approach as I packed my personal items. "This is insane," he muttered, closing my office door. "She can't do this." "Apparently she can," I replied, carefully wrapping the framed photo of my late parents. "She's the CEO now." Drew ran his hands through his salt and pepper hair. "Emma, we both know what's in that contract. Victoria would never—" "Victoria isn't in charge anymore." I placed the last of my belongings in a cardboard box. "Let it play out, Drew. But the investment portfolios, the Peterson account, you're the only one who truly understands the algorithms." I felt a hollow smile form on my lips. Then, I guess Meredith has made her first executive mistake. As I carried my single box toward the elevator, I felt dozens of eyes following me, some curious, some pitying, all wondering why the quiet analyst who'd kept to herself was leaving without a fight. None of them knew the truth, none except Drew. And tomorrow, Meredith would learn it too. I spent the night in my apartment staring at the ceiling, my phone buzzing with concerned texts from Drew. "Victoria's back in town tomorrow," he wrote. "She has no idea what Meredith did." I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled out the copy of my contract from my home safe, the agreement that changed everything 5 years ago when Blackwood Financial was on the brink of collapse after the market crash. The morning came with a strange sense of calm. I made coffee, dressed in my best suit, and waited. At precisely 9:15, my phone rang. "Have you lost your mind?" Victoria Blackwood's voice thundered through the speaker. "I leave for 3 days, and you fire our most valuable asset?" I couldn't hear Meredith's response, only Victoria's rising voice. Drew had patched me into their office confrontation via conference call, muting my line. "Did you even read her contract before you terminated her? Do you understand who she actually is to this company?" A pause, then Victoria's exasperated sigh. "For God's sake, Meredith, the contract is in the safe. The combination is your birthday. Read it. Now." The sound of a heavy door opening, papers shuffling. "Page 3, paragraph 4, Victoria instructed, her voice tight with controlled fury. Silence stretched for almost 30 seconds. Then a small, strangled sound from Meredith. That's impossible," she whispered. "Emma is the majority investor? She owns 51% of Blackwood Financial?" The quiet analyst you dismissed yesterday saved this company with her family's fortune after your father died, Victoria said coldly. She preferred to work behind the scenes, using her financial genius without the pressure of leadership. That was our arrangement. Why didn't you tell me? Meredith's voice had lost all its previous confidence. I thought you'd do your homework before firing people on your first day, Victoria replied. Apparently, I was wrong. The call ended abruptly. 10 minutes later, Drew texted, Victoria's ordering her car. She's coming to see you. My doorbell rang at 11:30. Victoria Blackwood stood in my hallway, her elegant posture at odds with the fury in her eyes. You should have called me immediately, she said, walking past me into my apartment. It wasn't my place to question the new CEO. I closed the door, watching Victoria take in my modest living space. Despite my wealth, I'd always preferred simplicity. Victoria sighed, removing her designer sunglasses. You've always been too gracious, Emma, just like your father. The mention of my father sent a familiar ache through my chest. Alexander Keller had been Victoria's husband's closest friend and financial advisor before both men died within months of each other. My father from cancer, her husband from a heart attack. When did you give Meredith control? I asked. 2 days ago. She's been pushing for years, and I thought she was ready. Victoria's voice cracked slightly. I wanted to believe she'd grown past the entitlement. I poured us both coffee. What happens now? She wants to meet with you. Apologize. Victoria took the mug. But the choice is yours. You own controlling interest. You could take over as CEO yourself. You could fire her. The thought had never crossed my mind, not even in the darkest moments of last night. That's not what I want, I said quietly. Then what do you want, Emma? 5 years ago, when you came to me with your inheritance and saved our sinking company, you insisted on staying in the shadows. No executive title, no public recognition, just the quiet analyst position where you could do the work you loved. Victoria studied me over the rim of her mug. Why? I moved to the window, looking out at the city skyline. You know why? Your panic attacks. Victoria nodded. After what happened at Goldman Sachs. My body tensed at the memory, collapsing during my presentation to the board, the whispers, the humiliation. The diagnosis of severe anxiety triggered by public scrutiny. Meredith needs to learn there are consequences to her actions, I said, changing the subject, but I don't want to destroy her career. My phone buzzed with a text from Drew. Meredith's called an emergency board meeting. She's telling everyone. Victoria and I exchanged looks. The news would spread through financial circles by nightfall. You can't hide anymore, Emma, Victoria said gently. It's time to decide who you really want to be at Blackwood Financial. I arrived at Blackwood Financial's glass headquarters with Victoria just as the emergency board meeting was scheduled to begin. My heart hammered against my ribs as we rode the elevator to the top floor. You don't have to do this, Victoria said. But I did. 5 years of hiding in plain sight had come to an end. When we entered the boardroom, every head turned. Meredith stood at the head of the table, her usual confidence visibly shaken. The 7 board members looked confused by my presence, the quiet analyst they'd barely noticed for years. Miss Keller, Meredith said stiffly, thank you for coming. Drew caught my eye from his seat, giving me the smallest nod of encouragement. I've called this meeting, Meredith continued, because I made a serious error yesterday that requires immediate correction. Her voice wavered slightly. Emma Keller is not just an analyst at our firm. She is, in fact, our majority shareholder. The silence was absolute, then erupted into murmurs of disbelief. 5 years ago, Meredith pushed on, when our company was facing bankruptcy after my father's death, Miss Keller invested her family fortune to save us. Per her request and contractual agreement with my mother, her role has been kept confidential. Board member Philip Mason, who'd never once spoken to me in 5 years, stared open-mouthed. You're Alexander Keller's daughter? The investment prodigy? I felt my chest tighten, the familiar pressure building. My father's reputation in financial circles had always overshadowed me. It was part of why I'd chosen anonymity. I managed, focusing on my breathing techniques. This means, Meredith said, that my decision to terminate Miss Keller's employment was not only inappropriate, but technically impossible. She owns controlling interest in Blackwood Financial. The tension in the room was palpable. These powerful people, who'd walked past my office daily without a second glance, were suddenly seeing me for the first time. "The question before us," Victoria interjected smoothly, "is where we go from here." All eyes returned to me. The path ahead forked clearly. I could assert my ownership rights and take control, or I could retreat back into the shadows. But the shadows had never been my choice. They'd been my refuge from panic and anxiety. Meredith's mistake had forced me into the light. "I'd like to speak with Miss Blackwood privately before we continue," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Then we can discuss the future leadership structure of the company." Meredith's face went pale, but she nodded. "Of course." Meredith followed me into her office, the same office where she'd fired me yesterday. The vintage Mont Blanc pen still sat in its glass case, a silent witness to both moments. "I had no idea," she began, closing the door. "That was the point," I replied. My hands were still trembling, but not from fear this time. "Your mother honored my request for privacy." "But why?" Meredith's perfectly styled appearance couldn't hide her confusion. "You're Alexander Keller's daughter. You could run any financial firm in the country." I moved toward the window, needing space. 6 years ago, I was on track to become the youngest partner at Goldman Sachs. During my final presentation to the board, I had a panic attack so severe they called an ambulance. The memory made my skin feel cold. The video leaked internally. I became the cautionary tale of someone who couldn't handle the pressure. Meredith's expression shifted from confusion to something resembling empathy. "After my father died," I continued, "I inherited his fortune and his financial instincts, but not his confidence in the spotlight. When Victoria told me Blackwood was failing after your father's death, I saw an opportunity to use my skills without the public scrutiny." "So you became the invisible backbone of our company," Meredith said quietly. I turned to face her. "Yesterday, you judged me based on performance metrics that were deliberately designed to make me appear average. You didn't bother to question why your mother protected my position for years. You didn't do your homework." She flinched at the accusation. "I wanted to prove myself, to show I earned this position, not just inherited it." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "What are you going to do?" she asked, a vulnerability in her voice I hadn't heard before. "You could take my position. The board would support you." Before I could answer, Drew knocked and entered without waiting. "Emma, you need to see this." He handed me his tablet. On the screen was a financial news alert. "Mystery investor at Blackwood Financial revealed. Alexander Keller's daughter steps out of shadows." My stomach dropped. Someone in the boardroom had leaked the story. "It's already hit the investor channels," Drew said grimly. "Our phones are ringing off the hook. Clients want to know if there's a leadership change coming." Meredith paled. This could trigger a market reaction. She was right. Uncertainty bred volatility. "We need to make a statement," I said, my mind racing. "Together." Meredith's eyes widened in surprise. "Together?" "This isn't just about either of us anymore," I replied, handing the tablet back to Drew. "It's about the stability of the company and everyone who works here." The next 2 hours passed in a blur. Victoria, Drew, Meredith, and I huddled in the conference room drafting our statement while our phones buzzed incessantly with calls from investors, reporters, and industry analysts. "We need to project stability and continuity," Drew insisted, typing furiously. My chest felt increasingly tight as the reality set in. I would have to face cameras, microphones, scrutiny, everything I'd structured my life to avoid. "Emma?" Victoria's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. "You're going pale." "I'm fine," I lied, my fingers digging into the leather armrest. Meredith, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. "What if I do most of the talking? You can simply confirm key points." I looked at her with surprise. "It's the least I can do," she added, not quite meeting my eyes. By 4 o'clock, we had our statement and a plan. The company atrium was packed with employees and select financial press when Meredith and I walked to the podium together. Camera flashes triggered an immediate flutter of panic in my chest. Breathe, Drew whispered behind me, just like we practiced. Meredith stepped forward first. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I'd like to address the recent reports regarding Blackwood Financial's ownership structure. Her voice carried confidence I hadn't expected. 5 years ago, when our company faced significant challenges, Emma Keller provided the investment that saved Blackwood Financial. Per her agreement with my mother, Miss Keller has worked as an analyst, contributing her extraordinary financial acumen while maintaining privacy regarding her majority stake. As promised, she handled most of the statement, explaining that yesterday's personnel misunderstanding had been resolved and the leadership team was united. When she stepped back, giving me my cue, my heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I stepped forward, gripping the podium to hide my trembling hands. Blackwood Financial's stability and success remain my highest priorities, I managed, focusing on a point on the back wall rather than the sea of faces. I have complete confidence in Meredith Blackwood's vision as CEO, and I look forward to a more active role on the board while continuing my analysis work that has driven our investment strategies. A reporter shouted, "Miss Keller, why did you hide your identity for so long?" The question hung in the air. I felt sweat beating at my temples. Then, unexpectedly, Meredith stepped beside me. Miss Keller's preference for privacy has allowed her to focus on what she does best, developing the financial strategies that have given our clients industry-leading returns. Any further questions about our leadership structure can be directed to our communications team. Thank you. She guided me away from the podium with a gentle hand on my elbow as Drew fielded follow-up questions. Thank you, I whispered once we were in the elevator. Meredith's expression was unreadable. We're not done yet. The markets responded positively the next morning. Blackwood Financial's stock rose 3% by noon, and client calls shifted from concerned inquiries to congratulations on our strategic revelation. I sat in my old office, which I'd reclaimed that morning, staring at the business news coverage on my tablet. Financial analysts were calling my emergence the return of the Keller legacy and speculating about how my investment strategies would evolve now that I was out of hiding. My phone buzzed with yet another message from a banker I hadn't spoken to in 6 years. I ignored it. A knock at my door made me look up. Melissa Chen, one of our senior portfolio managers who had never given me a second glance before, stood there with an awkward smile. Emma, I was hoping we could discuss the Peterson portfolio. I've always admired your analysis approach and would love your insights. The same Melissa who had walked past my desk for 5 years without a word. I forced a polite smile. Schedule something with my assistant. Assistant. I had an assistant now, Victoria had insisted. After Melissa left, Drew appeared in the doorway. The board's requested a special meeting tomorrow to formalize your role. They're suggesting Director of Strategic Investments. I nodded, trying to ignore the tightness in my chest. And Meredith? Remains CEO, but with closer oversight. He studied my face. You okay with that? It was never my goal to take her position, Drew. He nodded, then hesitated. She's waiting to see you, by the way, in the conference room. I found Meredith reviewing quarterly projections. Her usual confident posture returned. When she saw me, she straightened. Our major clients are responding well, she said, cutting straight to business. The narrative of the prodigal daughter returning to save her father's legacy plays better than we expected. I'm not interested in narratives, I replied, taking a seat. I'm interested in stability. Meredith closed her laptop. I owe you an apology, a real one, not the public statement version. The admission surprised me. I've spent my entire life trying to prove I was more than Victoria Blackwood's daughter, she continued, that I earned my place. When I took over, I was determined to make changes, show decisive leadership. Her voice softened. I judged you without understanding, and I was wrong. The sincerity caught me off guard. For the first time, I saw beyond Meredith's polished exterior to someone who, like me, had lived in a powerful shadow. We have something in common, I said quietly. We've both tried to define ourselves beyond our parents' legacies. A look of genuine understanding passed between us. The board meeting tomorrow, she said after a moment. They're going to want you to take a more visible role. I know. Can you handle that? The question wasn't challenging. It was concerned. I thought about the press conference, How I'd survived despite my racing heart. I'm going to have to try. The boardroom felt different the next morning. The same people sat around the same table, but now every gaze followed me as I took my seat. Victoria sat opposite Meredith, her expression carefully neutral. Board Chairman Phillips opened with formalities before addressing the elephant in the room. In light of recent developments, we need to formalize Miss Keller's role within Blackwood Financial. The proposal before us is to create a new position, Director of Strategic Investments, with oversight of all major portfolio decisions. I felt multiple expectations pressing on me: Victoria's, Meredith's, the board's, the weight of legacy and responsibility. Before we vote, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice, I want to be clear about my conditions. The room fell silent. Even Victoria raised an eyebrow. First, Meredith remained CEO with full operational authority. I looked directly at her. What happened between us was unfortunate, but I believe she has the right vision for the company's future. Meredith's expression registered genuine surprise. Second, I'll accept the director position, but I want to establish a leadership development program for all executives. I turned to the board members. What happened this week exposed a fundamental flaw in our company culture. Too many decisions were made without proper due diligence or understanding of our organizational structure. Phillips shifted uncomfortably. Miss Keller, that seems outside the scope of— I'm the majority shareholder, I interrupted, my heart pounding but my voice firm. It's entirely within my scope. Victoria's small smile told me she approved. And finally, I continued, I want to establish the Alexander Keller Foundation, funded by 10% of my annual dividends, to support financial education for underprivileged students. My father believed knowledge was the greatest equalizer. I intend to honor that belief. The vote that followed was unanimous. By noon, the press release was drafted, and by 2, I found myself in my new corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Drew brought champagne. To the new Director of Strategic Investments, he toasted. Your father would be proud. As we clinked glasses, a knock came at the door. Meredith entered, holding a small box. Am I interrupting? She asked. Drew excused himself tactfully. I wanted to give you something, Meredith said, placing the box on my desk. A peace offering of sorts. Inside was the vintage Montblanc fountain pen, the one that had been displayed in the CEO's office for decades. My father's pen, she explained. The one that signed your original agreement. I thought it belonged with you now. The gesture moved me unexpectedly. Thank you. We have an interview request, she said, changing subjects. CNBC wants us both to discuss the future of Blackwood Financial. My stomach tightened instantly. A national television appearance was far beyond the controlled environment of our press conference. Meredith must have seen the panic flash across my face. We'd do it together. I can handle most of it. Why does it need to be both of us? Because we're partners now, she replied simply, and the market needs to see that. As she left, my phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Dinner tonight? We need to discuss the Peterson account situation. The Peterson account, our largest client. I'd been so caught up in my new position that I hadn't checked their portfolio status. Quickly opening my analytics dashboard, I felt my blood run cold. The Peterson account was showing warning indicators I'd programmed years ago, patterns that preceded major market corrections, patterns only I would recognize. I sat across from Victoria at her favorite restaurant, the city lights twinkling through the windows beside us. How bad is it? She asked without preamble. The Peterson account is showing the same pattern recognition signals I programmed after the 2008 crash, I explained, keeping my voice low. If we don't rebalance their portfolio immediately, they could lose nearly 40% of their value when the correction hits. Victoria sipped her wine. Have you told Meredith? Not yet. I wanted your insight first. She set down her glass. You don't need my permission anymore, Emma. You outrank me now. The comment surprised me. This isn't about rank. Isn't it? Her gaze was penetrating. For 5 years, you've hidden in the shadows while I protected you. Now you're stepping into the light. The dynamics have changed. I felt a flush of defensive. I was never hiding. I was working where I was most effective. And now? She challenged gently. Where are you most effective now? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Meredith's name flashed on the screen. Peterson's son just called me directly, she said when I answered. He's concerned about some algorithm-generated warnings in their account dashboard. Did you program those? I did. And they're accurate, I replied. We need to meet. Tonight. An hour later, Meredith, Drew, and I huddled in the conference room, reviewing the data on the massive screen. These market indicators are subtle, I explained, highlighting specific patterns. But collectively, they signal a significant correction coming within 60 days. The Peterson account is heavily exposed. Meredith studied the projections with intensity. What's your recommendation? We need to rebalance their portfolio immediately, move 30% into hedge positions, increase cash reserves, and shift another 25% into our alternative strategy fund. Drew frowned. That's a $20 million shift. Peterson will demand explanations. And we have the CNBC interview tomorrow, Meredith added. If we make major moves with our largest client right before going on air, the implication hung between us. Any hint of market concern could trigger wider panic. I can explain the strategy without causing alarm, I said, surprising myself with the confidence in my voice. In fact, the interview gives us the perfect opportunity to position this as proactive management rather than reactive fear. Meredith looked at me with newfound respect. You'd do that? Go on national television and explain complex market hedging strategies? The old Emma would have retreated at the mere suggestion. But the Emma who had survived public exposure, board confrontations, and office politics felt different. Still afraid, but differently so. I'll do it with you, I said. Like you said, we're partners now. The next morning, I stood in the green room at CNBC, fighting the familiar tightness in my chest. Meredith, impeccable in a navy suit, noticed my controlled breathing. 5 minutes, the producer announced. Remember, Meredith said quietly, just like we practiced. I'll handle the introduction and transition. You take the technical questions. I nodded, focusing on staying present. You know, she added, my father always said Alexander Keller was the most brilliant mind on Wall Street, but his daughter would surpass him. She straightened my lapel. I think he was right. The simple vote of confidence steadied me more than any breathing exercise. And that's why Blackwood Financial is positioning certain client portfolios more defensively, I explained to the CNBC anchor, my voice steady despite the cameras. It's not about predicting disaster, it's about recognizing patterns and managing risk appropriately. Fascinating approach, Miss Keller, the anchor replied. Many on Wall Street have wondered where Alexander Keller's daughter has been all these years. Now we know. I smiled, feeling Meredith's supportive presence beside me. I've been exactly where I needed to be. 6 weeks later, the market correction hit exactly as my algorithms predicted. The Peterson account weathered the storm with minimal losses, while competitors watched their clients lose millions. Financial News called our prescient strategy the Keller Touch. In my new office, I signed the final papers establishing the Alexander Keller Foundation with the vintage Montblanc pen. Victoria and Meredith stood witness, our complicated triangle finding an unexpected balance. The first leadership development class starts next week, Meredith informed us. I'll be teaching the section on due diligence myself. Her self-deprecating smile showed how far she'd come. And I'll handle the module on recognizing hidden talent, Victoria added, giving me a meaningful look. Later, as I walked through the trading floor, heads turned, not with the sudden recognition of scandal, but with earned respect. Drew fell into step beside me. Peterson's son called. He wants to increase their investment by $50 million. I nodded, no longer the invisible analyst, but not quite the anxious woman who'd hidden from the spotlight either. I'd found a third path, one where my voice could be heard without drowning in others' expectations. That evening, I removed the "Do Not Disturb" sign that had hung on my office door for years. I wouldn't need it anymore. The woman who'd been fired for underperforming had found her true performance level, not in the shadows, not in the blinding spotlight, but in the balanced light of her own making. Sometimes the only way forward is through the very door you fear most.
Oh,